Welcome, and today topic is project management and PMP and planning process group. Today we are going to discuss about planning process group. So what are the inputs for preparing the planning project plan document? So that is project charter and stakeholder register. So project manager get this project plan document template, and that template will have one chapter for one knowledge area. So it will have the 8 chapters for all these knowledge areas. So that is scope management plan and time management plan, cost management plan, procurement management plan, quality management plan, communication management plan, human resource management plan, and risk management plan. So first he updates in scope management plan. He gets the high level requirements from project charter. So from key stakeholders he gets the most stakeholders who are associated with the business very closely to get the detailed requirements of this high level requirements stated in the project charter, and he always makes sure that the requirements get from the stakeholder it's in line with the high level requirements and project objectives stated in the project charter, and then he meets uses various facilitation techniques to gather this requirement, and then you will have a series of meetings to inform that if there is any requirements which are not in line with the project objectives. So he makes sure that it is all requirements is gathered is in line with the project objectives, and this collecting the requirements is most critical in project planning process, because the missing a requirement will leads to the lot of efforts and time and cost involved in the latter processes if identified in the latter point of time in the project. And if you incorporate those requirements, it requires a lot of time and cost, and sometimes that might lead to the project failure. So the most critical process in the project planning document is collecting the requirements. So that is refined requirements. So in that refined requirements, this process collection requirement is the process. In this process we do all these things to collect the requirements and define the requirements and document in the requirement traceability matrix. So to track this requirement in the entire project processes, so to track these requirements, he creates the requirement traceability matrix, and he assigns the ID for each requirement, and assigns the who is responsible, who has got high influence of stakeholders, which stakeholder has got high influence, and what are the what is the deliverables, and who is the resource assigned to these requirements, and acceptance criteria. So all this will be documented in the requirement traceability matrix. So once he gathers all requirements, and he will have a series of meetings with the sponsor and to decide what to include and what not to be included in the scope statement, so that all requirements in line with the project document and in line with the project objectives and high level requirements stated in the project charter will be placed in the scope statement. So this scope statement, whoever sees this scope statement, and the project team or key stakeholders or sponsor, so this scope statement tells the what exactly we do in this project. So the scope statement is very well clearly defined and no ambiguity. The project manager clearly defines the requirements in the scope statement and documents in this scope management plan. So once he documented the scope management plan, once he defined the requirements in scope and once he defined the scope, so he gets the final approval from the all stakeholders. So once he got the final approval and he goes to the next step, so based on the requirements stated in the scope statement, and he analyzes that, he determines what are the resources required for these requirements, what are the resources required, and the resources is goods and services or from the external to the organization or human resources. So for goods and services, he do the make and buy analysis. So these services we can make it in the organization for this project, or we get these services from our goods from external to the organization, that is third party by contract. If it is contract, he prepares the project statement of work and he prepares the procurement management plan. So then for human resources, so that he updates in the human resource management plan and determines the team. So what are the human resources required for this project? Then you get the initial commitment of these resources, and so next is once he determines the team and determines the what to purchase, so then next step is work breakdown structure. So work breakdown structure, the requirements is further breakdown into the work package level. So he prepares the work breakdown structure and then he updates the work breakdown structure dictionary. So each package, what is the requirements of that package and what is the cost involved, who are the resources will be assigned, will update the resources responsible for this work package level, and what is the requirement ID associated for this work package and what is the cost involved. So all details will be project manager is updates in the work breakdown structure. Once he got the work breakdown structure, then he move on to the time management plan. So he got the scope statement and work breakdown structure. So then he move on to the analyze the both and then move on to the time management plan, and he further break down this work packages into the activities. The activities is the level which is small enough to measure, estimate and manage. So he break down to the breakdown structure to the activity level. Sometimes project manager break down this work breakdown structure to this activity level in work package itself. So then he treat that work package as a activities. Once he got the activities, he sequence the activities. So he prepares the network diagram, and based on the requirements, scope statement and work breakdown structure and how this project will be performed, So that based on that, so he sequenced the activities and prepared the network diagram using precedence decision making method. So that using that method, we have a various methods to define the network diagram, and so he used this precedence making diagram method. So sequencing the activities and defines the what is the predecessor, what is the successor, and the link with that those activities by the arrows, and creates the network diagram. So this network diagram tells that how we are going to perform this project. This will be documented in the project planning document. Once he prepares the network diagram, and then he goes to the estimate resource requirements. So depends on the requirements of each activity, so that he estimate what are the resources requirements, the resources type and resource quantity. So resource type is equipment or material or human resources. So he estimate that, and he updates in the human resource management plan, and he will have a meeting with a series of meetings with the human resource department and gain the resource commitments, and he makes sure that he'll get the best resources for this project from the human resource department. So once the goods and services, it determines he updates in the procurement management plan. So he estimated that what are the resources required and what are the human resources required, and quantity of resources for each activity, what are the quantity of resources required. So estimate the overall resource requirements. Then once he got the estimated resources for each activity, and he estimate the activity duration. So for this, he will have the requirements of each activity, and he gets the past history of from the PMO, the related projects. So he goes through that past projects, how this activity estimate is done, and he goes through what are the organization assets we have to estimate the activity duration. So some organization might have estimate software, so if it is there, uses that to estimate the activity duration. And sometimes he involves the project team and then their expert judgment to estimate this activity duration. So uses sometimes the project team who has some technical knowledge associated with this requirement, so that he will do that. So he determined the activity duration. Once he determines the activity duration, then he developed the schedule. So he got the resources required for each activity, he got the estimated duration for each activity, and he got the network diagram. So now depends on the resources and depends on the activity duration and depends on the requirements, so how this project is performed. So he prepared developed the schedule model and applies the leads and lags, so and prepares the schedule model. So this about leads and lags we'll discuss while discussing the time management plan knowledge area. So once he got the estimated resources and quantity and the duration of that resources will be used in that activity, then he can get the resources billing per rate hour. So when he get the resources per rate hour billing, so then he can calculate the cost associated with this activity. So he creates the cost for each activity, and sum of that cost of that activities will gives the work package, what is the cost involved in the work package in work breakdown structure, and sum of that cost of the work packages will gives that total project. Or if there is any control accounts, so control project is divided into control accounts, and then control accounts further divided into work breakdown structure, and further divided into work package, and further divided into activities, and that will be the cost of that control account. So then summing of that control accounts will be the total budget of the project, and he had the managed reserves and contingency reserves, and he determines the preliminary budget, and he updates in the cost management plan. So this work breakdown structure will be documented in this cost management plan, and that on that structure he updates this each activity, each work package, each work breakdown structure, what is the cost involved in that, he updates in the cost management plan. Then it comes to the quality management plan, and it determines the quality standards and matrices. So what is the quality standards and matrices to be followed in this project, and determine the process and procedures to improve quality. So those details will be documented in the quality management plan. So communication management plan. In communication management plan, he prepares the communication management plan. This management plan will tells that what are the stakeholders, and what information to be sent, and whom to send, when to send, and what are the communication methods, and what are the communication channels, and what are the communication blockers, if it comes, what to be done. So these are all updated in the communication knowledge area, and then in that area it updates in plan communication. And stakeholder analysis, while doing the scope management itself, he do the stakeholder analysis, and he gets the stakeholder details of the stakeholder, their impact, their influence, their role, and everything. He do the analysis, and as part of when he is doing the scope management plan, he does the communication management plan, that he updates the communication management plan, that stakeholder analysis. So that stakeholder register he updates, and it comes under the communication management plan. So, and he determines the roles and responsibility of stakeholders and project team. So he communicates that what are the responsibility of the project team, and communicates to them, so that in planning phase itself the project team knows that what are the real roles and responsibilities. So and stakeholders. So he updates in document in HR management plan, and he prepares this matrix, so that roles and responsibility of stakeholders and project team, and then he makes sure that in planning phase itself the project team knows that their roles and responsibilities. So then is risk management plan. So based on his expert judgment, his experience, and based on his history of the past related projects gets from the PMO, so and he identifies the risk. So that risk is based on these assumptions and constraints defined as scope management, and if you analyze this assumptions and constraints, and he identifies the risk which lead to the risky event. So he identifies and the tight schedules in time management plan. it, he do analysis and he knows that where the project can trigger the risky event, so he identified the risk. And cost management plan, he identified the cost risk and quality risk, communication risk. So identify the risk and documents in the risk management plan. The well-defined project plan document will identify the all problems is going to face this project, and that identify the risk, so that in project planning phase itself he knows what the problems and prepares the response plan for all the risks. So he, based on his expert judgment, his experience, and communicate with the expert in stakeholders and sponsor, and use their expert judgment, and he communicates with the project team. So use the all expert judgment of and all the stakeholders involved in this project, and he identifies the risk. And if there is any uncertainty and is unknown knowledge area, so it might trigger the risk events, he investigate on it, and then while investigating he identifies the risk. So once risks are identified, and you make a quantitative and qualitative analysis, it finds the probability of the risk and impact of the risk on the project. So you do the qualitative and quantitative analysis and find the probability and impact on the project, and prepares the risk response planning. So risk response planning will lead to that what to be done while risk occurs, so that he document in the risk response and assigns that who is going to work on that when risk event is occurs, and that resource is updated in the risk response planning. So risk register, he will list all these identified risks and what is the response, what is the event, and what is the probability and impact, and what is the response if it occurs, and who is going to act on that, and what is the budget involved in this. So after risk management plan, the budget and also contingency reserves for this risk management plan, he calculates it. So this budget he will updates in the cost management plan. So now after done the risk management plan, he updates the cost management plan. So cost management plan is, he updates this risk budget. So this is project planning process is iterative and ongoing process till it gets the baseline. So initially I think I didn't mention that scope management plan, then it comes on to the time management plan and cost management plan. So this is triple constraints. So while preparing the project plan, it has to be in line with the project charter, what is defined there in project charter. So this is all scope, not only scope, that schedule, it must be in line with what is stated in the project charter, and cost, that should be in line with the project charter. So he defined the scope, and then he defined the schedule, and then he defined the cost. If it is cost is not in line with this project charter, then he goes back and modifies the scope, and he will have a meetings with the sponsor and key stakeholders. So because this cost is cross the limit, and he has to refine the scope statement, and then key stakeholder decides that what to be some requirements can be removed. So then again he updates the time management plan. Sometimes time duration of the project might be not in line with this what we expected, so that might lead to the change of cost scope statement. So these are triple constraints, and scope and time and cost. So keep on updating iterative process and ongoing process, and till we get that all scope and duration of the project and cost is in line with what is stated in the project charter. So that project manager will do this and updates all these knowledge areas. So these are continuously update this. So these are all of overview of what project manager do in preparing the project planning document. So when project planning document is well defined and realistic, then we get the less problems in the execution phases. So project manager is experience and is expertise, and and based on the previous project, similar related projects, so is well defined where this project document in realistic and then in detail, so that if the project planning document is well defined, then the more the well defined, and then we get less problems in the project execution process. So project planning document is most critical in this project management, and that is so planning process group, and these are knowledge areas. So in this project planning document he updates all these processes in these knowledge areas. So in integration management he updates the develop project management plan process. In scope management plan he updates these processes: collect requirements process, define scope process, and create work breakdown structure process. As part of time management plan, he updates the define activities process, sequence activities process, and estimate activity resources, estimate activity duration, and develop schedule. In cost management plan he updates this estimate cost and determine budget processes as part of the cost management plan. So quality management plan updates the plan quality, and human resource management plan he updates the develop human resource plan process. And communication management plan he updates the plan communication process. So as part of the risk management plan, so he updates the plan risk management, identify risk, perform qualitative risk analysis, and it updates the perform quantitative risk analysis process, and plan risk response. In procurement management plan he updates the plan procurement. So project manager updates these 20 processes as part of the planning process group.